Hey everybody, can y'all hear me? Awesome. So I have shared my screen with you guys. There is a QR code. If you have your phone, you can just scan that QR code to check in. That way it'll take note of your attendance and you'll be registered for some door prizes. Or there is a link also, the tiny URL/LPPS attendance. You can go there to log on to. And if you miss it, you can log in and check in later. It doesn't have to be right now at the beginning. I'll give everybody a minute to do that and see if anybody else is going to join us, and then we'll get started.
Okay, Kelly, it's right at 12 and we don't have anybody else waiting in the waiting room. I can continuously let people in if you want to get started.
Sounds good.
I'm also going to be monitoring the chat, so if anybody has any questions while Kelly's talking, then I can stop and call her attention to that, and then she'll do the same while I'm talking.
Yeah. We'll flip-flop.
Yep.
Good deal. So yes, y'all please ask questions. You can type them in the chat box. That'll be the easiest way that we can keep track of it. But this is Keeping It Digitally, Witty and Wise for grades 3, 4, and 5. So Rachel and I both taught summer school this summer, and I'm sure as Rachel was, I was a little bit anxious. I was a little bit nervous getting into it. It was the first time we had this type of scenario where here we are not being able to meet these summer school kids, but having to teach them and reach them and make those connections virtually. So we dove in, and it really was quite successful. I enjoyed the experience, and I think a lot of that has to do, I did have great groups of kids, but I was able to utilize a lot of different platforms, different resources into Zoom that went along with Wit and Wisdom. So on this slide that I'm sharing with you now, I'll kind of talk through it, and then I want to share my screen and show you in some specifics about each of those platforms. The first thing I have a note of up here, there was an ELA, the ELA meetings last week, and I'm sure as you guys have heard that InSync platform, that'll definitely be beneficial for Wit and Wisdom, but we won't have access until August 3rd for that. So we'll be looking forward to that to utilize as well. Google Classroom is the main hub that we used during summer school, and I was lucky enough, we even used that at my home-based school. I'm at Jubin Park, and we used that with our students early on in the year. So I was really grateful that my 5th graders had been used to that in the classroom. So once we went on, we were quarantined and we were stuck, we still had communication through Google Classroom. And I'll show you guys in just a minute lots of different ways that you can utilize that. Different things you can post, such as links, all those links from Wit and Wisdom, resources, assignments. I did want to make sure and say that I got word that there's going to be a generic format that we'll need to use to post assignments into Google Classroom. So before you start posting anything, just check with your school administrators to check on that format so you're not doing double duty. Lots of different forms and exit tickets that are already made for you on Google Classroom. My personal favorite, it's where the students can compose their writings. It can be any of those focus question tasks, end of module tasks. It could be little journal prompts. It can be anything. They can virtually turn that in, and it allows for endless teacher-student correspondence. There's no limit on how many times you can go back and forth with that one. So I'm going to show you guys a few things through that. Right here. Can y'all give me a thumbs up if you see my Google Classroom homepage? I just want to be sure. Thank you. So I just created, and if you're not familiar with Google Classroom at all, this will be like your homepage. You'll have all your different classes listed here. And I know there was another session on Google Classroom, so some of you may already know what I'm talking about, but I just want to be sure in case anybody's not familiar yet. So I just created this class, little demo class, so I can show you some of the different features. It is really easy to use. Your students, you can manually input them. They can log in through this code here. It's easy for them to have access. And every student does have a Google login. And you can find that on the homepage of the PowerSchool portal. So your stream here, it's just where anything you post, you can write a message, you can give them a challenge, anything like that. But classwork is what I want to focus on with you guys. So I just posted 3 different examples. Some Zoom ELA tips, and if you were in attendance at the ELA meetings for 3rd, 4th, and 5th, you saw that already. Just some different platforms. The next one I wanted to show you, I'm going to come back to that one. Lots of Wit and Wisdom resources are digital, which is great now. So it's super easy for you to just post a link on here through Google Classroom, and your students have access to that. They can go click on it as many times as they need to. But what I also found beneficial through summer school is when I was sharing my screen like I am with you all, I could go through, and a lot of times we take for granted what kids, okay, do they know that's the title up there? This is the date that it was published. And those little advertisements that come up so frequently, I was able to have a nice little chat about that, about how, okay, we don't need to click on different ads. If they're just popping up, we ignore them or press that little X. So we don't want them shooting off to another website. So lots of different, anything you can get to on the internet, you can link to Google Classroom. So I told you guys that my favorite was the ability for students to type and turn in their writing. So I have an example here. I just took a little snippet. This was from one of my students during summer school. It was one of the focus question tests we had. So you see the writing prompt. Her response is here in the black, and my response to her is right there in the green. So I just wanted you to see that it's easy for the students to view. This is the same view that they would get after I sent my feedback to them, positive, what needs to be changed, what worked well, what can they add on. So you can see right now I could keep typing and send it back to her. So it can go back and forth as many times as you need to. During summer school, I used breakout rooms a lot. And I know that's on my list you can do for small groups. I incorporated individual breakout rooms. That gave me the opportunity to verbally go over these writings or whatever assignment I needed to one-on-one with students. So we all know it's hard for them. While this is a great feature and they can see, okay, Ms. Lowry put that, but maybe I'm not really sure, I need to clarify. So breakout rooms, having those one-on-one to go over these writings were super beneficial. So I just wanted to show you a snippet of what it would look like, and they can, those kids are more tech savvy than we are. They can figure a lot out. So they know how to turn it back in, receive it, add their comments, and go back and forth. So it was super great for that. So that was just a little bit, like I said, for the hub that holds everything for Google Classroom. You can put comments on there. If you have little tablets or Kahoots, Google Classroom is the place to go for that. Puzzle, I can show you it has a lot of interactive review videos. So as we were completing a skill, we would watch a little video or little checkpoints focused on a certain skill. And I would utilize the chat box through the Zoom platform for the students to type in their answers. So it's all multiple choice. And so if they thought, okay, I think A is the answer, they all just type in their answer real quick, and I'll click on whatever the majority is, and then it leads to some good discussion for that too. But just an example puzzle, if you don't have an account, it's really cool. But it'll show you on the little preview. So right here at 47 seconds, there's a little multiple or so few students. We did it more whole group, but you can do that either way. Forgot about it. Maybe your good features on here. The screen share like I'm doing, like I mentioned. I can pull up the different websites. I can pull up PowerPoint. I can pull up anything that I want my students to see on my end. The chat box was great for those Edpuzzle videos, but it could also be great for encouraging student critiquing. You know, my summer school group was really good at commenting on each other. Maybe one was sharing an assignment or an answer, and they would provide feedback for them through the chat box. You could also do it verbally, but it's just different. A variety, I think, is what will keep those students engaged instead of doing the same thing repetitively. So the chat box is good for a number of things. And then the breakout rooms. I utilize those a lot. Like I mentioned before, for individual use to provide feedback one-on-one, but for small groups, you can assign your breakout rooms at random, where you just randomly group into however many students you want, or you can assign specific students to the room. So you might have a high and a low student working, you might have 2 lows, you might have 2 highs to challenge. Endless possibilities there with the breakout rooms. The whiteboard is another feature on here. Let me stop that share there. I used the whiteboard feature a lot. As we know, for those Wit and Wisdom components, so many graphic organizers, and a lot of my students, especially throughout summer school, needed some extra guidance. So you can go through here, you can type some answers. So here's our story map for, you know, assignment 4A, or what have you, vocabulary list. If students have questions at the beginning of the lesson you want to keep track of, you can come back to it at the end. The whiteboard will save as long as you just keep it hanging out there and don't delete anything. So the whiteboard was great for that as well. Little emojis the students were able to find. You know, I saw some of you already did like the thumbs up or the clapping. They love doing that. So it's just a lot of variety, but meaningful variety. I was able to differentiate a lot of instruction because of the different platforms available. So I'll pause there. Were there any questions in the chat? I know I'm anxious for the NSYNC. We'll see. Couldn't do attendance. Okay. I'll copy it. Okay. Well, I'm going to let Rachel share some different platforms as well, and just keep up. If you have questions, let us know.
Okay, so I am going to talk about, let me do my screen share. Okay, so I want to talk about Kahoot and NearPod. I used both of those during my time in summer school just to do something different, so that my kids weren't doing the same thing every day, and they didn't have like the same like question and answer like worksheet type things. So for Kahoot, if you don't know what Kahoot is, it's a game-based puzzle. It makes it like it's a game-based platform. It makes it like a like Jeopardy or something like that. So they have to chime in and answer. Different ways to use Kahoot would be like vocabulary. I've thought about making a Kahoot every week for the vocabulary words that are in your lesson for the week that we usually go over. So then they're reviewing that. And then to offer some type of incentive, like if they scored 100% on the Kahoot 2 days of the week, then they don't have to take the test on Friday. So at least they are trying and working instead of just clicking through and answering. You could also break them up into groups for those kids in your classroom so that they had teams to answer those questions, maybe the first couple of days. You could use it as a compare and contrast. You can use it as a live in your classroom, or you can assign it as an assignment. So then they're going to work on that at home in their Google Classroom during their time that they're working on their assignments at home. Multiple choice, true, false. You can do it as an opinion or a survey, or some type of an exit ticket or formative assessment just to see how they're doing on that lesson, especially for those kids at home when their days are not with you and you really can't see how they're doing with that assignment that you've assigned. So one that I made it for the module 4 of 4th grade for Greek myths. I did it for Greek myths, did a Kahoot for that. So I'm going to show you guys that just so you can kind of see what it looks like if you're not familiar with Kahoot. Okay. So here we are. It's trying to load. Well, okay. So this one was, what type of myth is it? Was it a creation myth, a morality myth, or both? Okay, so it says, what type of myth is it? So it'll show you my different questions. So for like Achilles' heel, would that be a creation myth, a morality myth, or both? And it's a creation myth. So for Pandora's box, you see it gives you, and I had it so the answers were the same every time so that the kids weren't confused by the answers moving around. So creation myth, morality myth, or both. So for Pandora's box, it's both. So you kind of see how that is set up. But if you go, but once you're back in Kahoot after your kids have taken the, done the quiz, and you want to see how they did, how things are, you can click on your reports, and you see the quizzes that you've given, and I have done it. Let me switch my screen share. I've copied my students' the report page so that you could see how they did, but I covered their names. So for this group of students that we did over summer school, you can see that they, you know, it has their names here, how many questions they got right, what percentage correct they had, how they ranked, and then also it tells me which students needed help. So on that assignment, which students didn't do so well, and I may need to go over that with them again. And so all 3 of my students needed help again that day. And then, but 2 of them didn't finish. So because I put a timer on that, 2 of them were unable to answer at least one of those questions because the time ran out. So I know I can go look at those here, the unanswered. I can go work with those 2 students to see, was it something they didn't understand, or did they just not have time to finish that question? So then we're going to look at NearPod. NearPod is an instructional platform that merges formative assessment and dynamic media for collaborative learning experience, and it also enhances student engagement. So NearPod, you can use a variety of different platforms in one assessment. And I made a quiz out from NearPod to for the end of the time in summer school. I did a NearPod for that. Instead of a typical paper pencil test, it was different questions using a different platforms that they have online, or different assessment tools that we had learned about. So NearPod, you can use it to create interactive lessons. You can import your existing Google Slides into NearPod to make a slideshow. You can assign virtual field trips through NearPod. They have interactive boards, so we'll show you one of those where the students can post like a sticky note type question in the NearPod. You can take a poll. They have matching pairs, which would be good for vocabulary as well. I also did it because I'm matching pairs for theme of the myths, and then also interactive quizzes. So we'll look at the NearPod. The only thing about NearPod is that you cannot do a NearPod while you're on Zoom, because if you have the microphone feature enabled where the students can record their answers, and I'll show you that. So here is NearPod. Can everyone see my screen for NearPod? Okay. So if we're going to create a new NearPod, a new lesson, like here you can create a new NearPod, or you can create a lesson using your Google Slides that you've already done. So here is a new lesson. I was just going to show you guys the different things that you could add. So here, in a new slide, you can add a video, some web content, a slide, a NearPod 3D, a virtual field trip, a sway, a slideshow, any of those things that you had already created, or an activity. A time to climb is a great like multiple choice quiz if you wanted to use those multiple choices. Open-ended questions would give you a question and then a space where the students can type their answer in. Also, there's a record button as like a flip grid. The students can record their answer instead of typing it. Matching pairs. So then you would match different flashcards to different things. And like I said, I used that for theme in this assignment that I did. You can make a quiz, which is more time to climb questions. You can add a link to your current Flipgrid if you have created one for that assessment. A draw it, which is where you can post something and the kids could draw or color on the assignment, so they could circle or select the correct answer. Collaborate, which is like a message board. They can post different things with a sticky note. You can take a poll, a fill in the blank, and or a memory quiz, so some more different types of matching. So here is the lesson that I created. So here, the story that we read, I posted the story and my so I posted in my Google Classroom, I posted the story that the students had to read, and I posted a link to the NearPod. So they had to go read the story. And then for those students who have read aloud, you could do the, you could either record yourself or do a screencastify of yourself reading that story. And then there's the NearPod lesson. So they would click on that to answer the questions for the story, when the raven soared. So here's the a picture. So the very first one, they have to, I need to switch to the student view so that we can answer the questions. Okay, so here, what are the two definitions of the word trickster as used in the second paragraph? And so for this one is a draw it. So the kids could pick their answer. They're going to circle, and it says 2. So they're going to have to pick 2, and they use their mouse to color on the page. This, I inserted 2 Flipgrids into this question, into this quiz. So they would come to this question and log in with their Google Classroom login. That's the only downside. And had I realized the open-ended questions could record, I would have used that before when I was making this, because it did make it difficult to grade inserting a Flipgrid, because then I had to flip between NearPod, grading that assignment, and then go to Flipgrid and watch their videos, as opposed to having everything in one location, which would have been nice. So the next question is also a Flipgrid. So this one is, how did the raven trick the chief, and how was he able to get into the chief's boxes? Again, on this one, they're going to circle the correct one, and I just picked pictures from online, and so they have to circle the correct answer. And here is an open-ended question. So this is where I was explaining, like, what was the theme of the myth, and then they would need to go reread the italicized information. So they could type here, or they could record their answer using audio. Again, they cannot do this if they are logged into a Zoom, because your microphone is using the Zoom. But you could assign this as a Google Classroom assignment when they're not going to be on a Zoom meeting with you. So again, they could type or they could record their answer. This one, they had to look at the picture and answer. So I see in the picture and I read in the story. And so I did that as a fill in the blank. So in the picture, I saw this, and in the story, it says this. And so they could actually type here, or they can write if they have a touch screen or are good with moving their mouse. Or if they wanted to insert a text box, they just move that over the box, and they type in their answer there. This is the matching. So what does the myth explain, and then what is the theme of the myth? So they would have to match the cards to, and this one we were comparing Pandora's box to When the Raven Soared. And then here, another thing that we learned was like prose versus a drama or a play. And so they had to read the story rewritten as a play or a drama, and then compare it to how it was with the prose, using those vocabulary terms that we had learned. so that here they had to type in their answer, and I had them type instead of having the ability to record their answer here, because I really wanted them to use those vocabulary terms that we had learned and the different and then this one is the collaborate, where they would add their ideas. So the Mohawk says, a good chief gives and he does not take, so that they would could add their sticky notes. So here they're going to share their thoughts on what the according to the Mohawk saying, what does that mean, and then what we learned about the chief in When the Raven Soared. So they could type their answer here and then post it to the wall, and it would come there as a sticky note, and then each student's name would be on that. So after you would give your NearPod, you could also go and look at the reports in that. So here I have my reports of When the Raven Soared. I can click on that to see how my students did. I added a slide in there so that you don't see actually my students' names. So here is, I copied and pasted the report from that quiz that I gave. So here's a summary. 67% of them answered, 33% of the questions were skipped, so they didn't answer it. I really think it's counting a skipped question if they went into the Flipgrid to answer, because they didn't actually enter anything onto that question, because they all answered it. So here I could click on my open-ended questions, my drawing questions, the matching pairs, collaborate, and the Flipgrid, and I could see what each of their answers were on those questions in there. It has the list of the students' names here, how they did on each of those quizzes. So does anybody have any questions?
I want to add in, I know a lot of this stuff, it might be repetitive for some of you. It might be brand new to you. I know that I wasn't super familiar with NearPod until Rachel had, kind of walked me through it and showed me. So now I'm excited to get in there and play around with it. And that was the best way that I was able to learn and come across a lot of stuff. Yeah, for the Zoom, I had a couple of other teacher friends. We were nervous about playing around with the breakout rooms and stuff with our students for the first time. So we just created a practice one, and it was, the few of us just playing around, each of us taking turns being the host, because that view is different from the student's view.
Yes.
So playing around.
And I also did that with my own students in their Google Classroom. So I created my Google Classroom, and then I assigned my own children to my Google Classroom. So then I could log in under my kids' account and see what does it look like for the students. If I'm trying to explain to somebody how to go over a Zoom meeting, how to log into Google Classroom and edit your assignment, my view is completely different than the student's view. So I just assigned my own kids, and I would go look at it before every day that I had assigned something, and that way I could compare it to tell my own students in the classroom, this is what it looks like and this is where you need to go. So just playing around with it, go do a Kahoot quiz, go create the NearPod or a Flipgrid, and just, or make it and then make your own kids take the quiz. That's what I did this summer. I, had my own kids answering Flipgrids just to see how it worked and how I needed to grade it, and how I, using those different technologies and platforms, so that I'm not making it an assignment and then sending my students on that with really no help or guidance. Right. And then also Kelly, when you were talking about Zoom, when you're screen sharing, how you can see on my screen how it's, or maybe you can't, it's lit up in green as to what you're sharing. So that was always helpful for me to know, did my screen share go through? Is it working? Because if it's outlined in green, I know that that's the screen I'm sharing. So if you have multiple tabs open, again, what's in green is what is being shared at that time.
And all of these different resources, everything can be stored, you know, Google Classroom can be their go-to. Common Lit was another site I used for like their Cold Comp quizzes. And
Right.
they knew it's there in Google Classroom. They scan their Clever badge and it shoots them through. So that's why we, you know, began with Google Classroom, because that can be the store all for everything.
Yeah, and for NearPod and for Kahoot, they have a Google Classroom tab, so then you can share it directly to your Google Classroom instead of having to create a new assignment. So then everything is one place, just like I showed you with the NearPod. They had to go read the story, but then the NearPod link was right there in Google Classroom, so you didn't have to post anything, how they get in, the codes or things. They just click on it right in your Google Classroom. All of these platforms have added those Google Classroom, even Remind, Facebook, if you're using a Facebook app. I know some teachers did that during the time of school closures. They have a tab to add that, to share your assignment digitally, whichever platform you're using. And for us, we're using Google Classroom in Livingston Parish, and they have the Google Classroom tab. Also, Google Classroom has an app that you can download, which was really helpful for me when I was trying to provide feedback to students, so that I didn't always have to sit down at a computer somewhere. I could answer those questions on my cell phone if I was in the car or doing something with my kids. I had it right there with me. I know it seems like a lot, but to me, it's easier to, as soon as I got a notification, to be able to do that instead of having, you know, 10 or 15 things to do. And if you're in a regular classroom setting, to have 40 or 50 things assigned or commented on when you sit down at your computer.
Rachel, somebody asked if we've ever used Google Meet. I have not. Have you used Google Meet?
I have not. I do plan to use Microsoft Teams, because that is approved. I'm a special ed teacher, and that is approved to have IEPs on, where Zoom is not approved because of confidentiality. So I do intend to use Microsoft Teams, but I have not used Google Meet.
Any other questions, ladies, gentlemen?
I'm trying to.
There is a little survey. I know Rachel's probably going to share the link, or I can, either one.
I am. I'm going to share the survey for the end. If anybody has any other, I know here's the link for attendance. If anybody still couldn't mark their attendance,
You just highlight it
and copy it. And also for, I'm going to post the link for the end survey. Again, and you would just type that in, and it's this. I can put the URL in the comment box so that everyone can see it. Kelly, could you type the survey link in there? It won't let me click on the chat while I'm screen sharing.
We appreciate y'all joining us, and be sure and let us know. You reach out. Any questions that come up, we'll be happy to help.
Yep, absolutely. Could send me an email and I can get back with you.